If you didn't understand before, I hope you understand now. Because you're now listening to the We Talkin Podcast, brought to you by Island Girl Team. This podcast, we are literally talking about every and anything with your girl, Camilla Gomes. So subscribe from wherever you get your podcast and get ready to talk. Welcome to the 5th episode of the We Talkin Podcast, brought to you by Island Girl Ting. I am your host, Camilla Gomes. And for today's episode, I'm here with Miss Jorien Wuite. And we're going to talk about her running with the D66 in the Tweede Kamer in the Netherlands for the upcoming parliamentary elections. Okay, to learn more about Miss Jorien Wuite, so she is considered as a kingdom child, as she is born in the Netherlands but has been raised on Sint Maarten and various islands within the Dutch Caribbean. For those who do know of her from Sint Maarten, she is most notably known as our Minister of Education, Youth, Culture and Sports between January 2018 and June 2018, and then recently the Minister of Plenipotentiary, I can't pronounce that word in my life, between 2018 and 2019. And she currently hosts a couple advisor roles within the Sint Maarten and in the Netherlands. And she's also currently running for the parliament in the Netherlands. So I'm happy to have you here. You are our first politician on this series. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Camilla. And it is great to see you after so many years, because you both left the island in 2018. And interesting also to have our little conversation before we started to feel of how you developed and what type of things have been ongoing in your life. It's pretty intense these last 3 years, right?
Yeah, it definitely has been. So we're gonna just jump straight into the conversation today. So my first question, of course, is what motivated you to run for the Tweede Kamer, and how has your previous political experience prepared you for this election?
Yeah, that's of course the major question. It's been it definitely triggered during the time that I worked as Minister of Plenipotentiary for Sint Maarten in The Hague, in the Netherlands. And that we, of course, were primarily responsible for the Caribbean agenda in the second chamber and the Dutch parliament, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And even though it's a partial responsibility, that you have other side activities and duties as well, mm-hmm. It was a very critical component because, of course, the Kingdom of the Netherlands with the Caribbean countries went through their process of change since 2010, the dismantling of the Netherlands Antilles. A lot of things have been ongoing. Mm-hmm. Certain things have progressed well, other things didn't progress well. And one of the things that concerned me during the term, indeed, in the Netherlands, definitely related to the one-sided type of story that came to the forefront in the Netherlands, which were always related to failure, financial woes, mm-hmm. Disqualifications in terms of good governance practices. Mm-hmm. While my experience has been that there's so much more, and that there's definitely a need to bring a more diverse and an enriched type of conversation and narrative and debate to the second chamber. Mm-hmm. So it was at times painful to see the annoying type of debates and as I said, one-sided type of narrative. I didn't see any Caribbean representation in the second chamber either. Mm-hmm. And we know that representation matters, and it makes a difference. Should bring a different type of story. So that's what I observed in 2019. That didn't automatically, brought me to, I'm going to participate in a second chamber, because it was, it really came, and I think it was triggered further because of my return back to Sint Maarten and mm-hmm. COVID-19. Mm-hmm. COVID-19 gives you a time to reflect, see what's happening, where my development, my growth, my opportunities to make a difference were. I was also approached during the visit of Jorien Wuite and Samira Rafaela. They also approached me, mm-hmm. D66 has been my party on numerous occasions. 9 out of 10 times when I voted, it was also for that party. And then it started by them asking whether I would have an interest to participate in their preparation of their election program, and their ambition and interest to have a strong paragraph related to the Caribbean parts and the relations within the Kingdom of the Netherlands. They wanted to come out with a stronger profile, more priorities, and so we worked together on those themes, and then it started to grow further. And then I indeed, in September 2020, decided to make that step. But that's a long process. That doesn't automatically say like, whoa, I would like to make myself available to partake in the elections and with D66. That's not how it worked with this established party. It goes through a long process, a variety of assessment conversations and meetings. And you have to prepare a motivational letter. You have to submit your resume. You have to go through a variety of simulations and exercises and debates to see how they would then, if they see you as a suitable candidate, and if so, which position they would propose you to have on the list. So that was a very enriching, exciting experience. And then indeed in October 2020, it concluded to my number on the list. But in the meantime, in 2020, a lot of things have happened. We have had the Black Lives Matter. We've had the translation of the Black Lives Matter movement into the Netherlands as well. We've had, more activism and ideas around, hey, diversity and representation of the Afro community needs to change. Matters related to the kick out of Zwarte Piet and the Sinterklaas type of issues, they were really at the forefront in the summer. And therefore the discussion about where are Black representatives in the second chamber really became a topic. So what I consider to be wonderful is that there is a broad and much more a richer list of indeed Afro and people of color that will participate in a variety of parties. So which is a hopeful signal. And so we are with many. I sometimes even also go outside the D66 where we meet then, for instance, on a weekly basis with other people of color that decided to run and partake in the elections, and to indeed get to know one another, but also to build specific type of skills to ensure that we do well. So those type of factors contributed. Of course, D66 sees me and saw me as a person that is strongly committed to the Caribbean Kingdom relation issues, where I really believe that something new is necessary, and that subject is very rich. It varies from the position of Caribbean students in the Netherlands in education. It relates to climate change discussion issues. It relates to how fragile our economies of small island development states are, and how you can collaborate to strengthen economic opportunities. So the kingdom relations and the Caribbean relations subject and committee, because there's a separate committee in the second chamber, has a huge responsibility with subjects, as I said, that can vary to climate, to education, to culture, to discrimination, and the need for the Netherlands to apologize for their role in transatlantic slavery activities. And those type of things are therefore very necessary, very needed, and I really hope that it's going to have a strong outcome on the 17th of March, when the elections will indeed conclude, that there will be Caribbean representatives that will be elected. I hope to be one of them. I also hope that D66 will come out strong, and that it will therefore be a signal for new type of leadership, because that's what we have profiled on D66, that it is time for new beginnings. It's time for new leadership. We've seen the leadership over the last 10 years under the leadership of Prime Minister Mark Rutte, which has done quite some damage as well. So a change is necessary in a challenging environment, that you probably seen and experienced in the States as well, in terms of the drivers of populism, of a right-wing type of climate, in which people of color are sometimes, excluded and considered, secondary rate citizens, etc. Those type of themes are also pretty prevalent in Europe and also in the Netherlands. So within that context, you have to see those moves for the better and for indeed a clear signal and a different direction that the Netherlands should go into.
Okay. And I know you mentioned that you hope there's like more representation from the Caribbean Netherlands within there. So there are other members from the different islands. Okay, that's cool. That's really great. And so my second question, while you mentioned that you were going through the entire process where you had to like submit your name and then go through internal debates, etc., before they approve you to go on the list. So what was that experience different from then when you ran for parliament in Sint Maarten? Like what was like the vast differences in between those two processes?
Yeah. Well, I do think that since I decided to run with an established party, and not a small party, it is a party with 19 seats at this time. So it's the number 4 political party out of a list of at least that are currently in parliament of 13, and they're currently at number 4. So it is an established party, and they take the process of the selection of candidates pretty serious. So that was kind of new. It's much more extensive than the experience that I've had in Sint Maarten, where it is, sometimes who you represent or what type of family members you may bring along or how many votes you're able to tag. But I think the procedure to look at matters of experience, matters in terms of your views, your ability to have, a strong debate, they really profiled their preferred candidate. They had made kind of like a profile for their new member of parliament, which had to, show that they can be strong on the content, but also daring and with guts in terms of the ability to bring matters to the second chamber and to parliament, to the floor. Those type of things were considered relevant, and those are criteria that they applied in the process. You even had to do, a couple of test debates, and simulations on a variety of subjects. In addition to that, they also look at, okay, so they have like more than 60 candidates on the list. And the top 20 are, of course, at least for this party, are the amount of candidates that can be elected, because we're currently at 19. And then they look at, what's the profile, Camila, what would be your strength, what is your theme or what's your subject? So they really look at diversity in terms of gender, in terms of sexuality, sexual orientation, in terms of diversity, in terms of color, ethnicity, age, younger a group, we have 25, 26-year-old candidates on the list as well, and those that are older, close to 60 or 65. So they really want to ensure that it is a proper representation of the Dutch society. And that's how they then compile, for instance, in the top 20 lists, So, and it's also about, Jorien is stronger in kingdom relations. Somebody else might be good in culture or in education or the economy or international affairs or climate or infrastructure. So they want to have a diverse group with different type of expertise to bring to the table, so that they know that once it gets so far that you're elected, and you have to indeed divide the committee representation, that you have the right type of profile to hit the ground running, so to speak.
Okay.
That were some of the differences. And for the rest, you can also say politics is politics also.
Yeah, that is true. That is very, very true.
Yeah.
And so okay, so let's say you've got elected and you're now one of the, like, I would say few representations of the different Antillean people on the floor of the Tweede Kamer. What is at least like one subject or one thing that you want to tackle that can help the Antillians living in the Netherlands, especially our vast young population with so much of us in the Netherlands getting our education?
Yeah. Well, I think it's, first of all, once you're an elected representative, you have to ensure that you have proper connection during your term. That means that you have to engage in and have consultations and conversations with a variety of people within society, so that you have your ears on the ground, that you listen to the things that are happening, and that you're able to translate that into the right issues that you bring to the floor of Parliament through initiative laws. Or that's a principle that you have to apply. You need to be honest. You need to be accountable in the way that you work, and accountability goes in terms of staying connected with persons and groups within society, to explain and to clarify what you do, and to see how things should happen and whether you should do it, and how that best fits and can become effective. So that's the style and the principles that you need to apply as a representative. In terms of the issues, of course, kingdom relations. And the fact that we have, as they say it in Dutch, democratisch deficit, I'm sure that when you were in youth parliament, you probably heard that term, that the statute of the Kingdom of the Netherlands has its strengths, but also has its weaknesses in terms of inequality within and between the countries, versus the Caribbean countries versus the Netherlands. So that means that you need to really address those type of things and see how you can apply and make changes in a pragmatic manner. Oh, somebody's waving. Sorry about that. So that you can strengthen and minimize or take away the inequality, because we have seen the damages done, and we've seen the one-sidedness in which the governance and the relationships were played out. We've seen a one-sidedness in terms of supervision, interventions, but no dialogue to also explore other possibilities where you can collaborate in a more constructive and a more fair and equal manner. So D66 has propositions and points of views on our political program, and that will therefore influence what type of priorities I would work at. And one is therefore to further perfect the democracy, and was, for instance, what we want to propose and what I want to work on is that that a group of special delegates coming from Curaçao, Aruba, and Sint Maarten, even to consider for the best islands, to see that they get not only the ability to speak at the floor of the second chamber, which is what we have now. You're allowed to speak, to clarify your points, and you can bring motions, but you don't have voting rights. And what we are proposing is that for matters of kingdom laws, we do not have a kingdom parliament. So that means that the kingdom laws that some of them do affect our Caribbean countries, but we are not able to vote for them. So what we're proposing is to have special delegates appointed with voting rights in the second chamber. And that's, for instance, a very clear proposition that I would like to work on. Even though it's a fundamental change, it will have to go to the level of the Constitution. That will require changes, but it will then indeed be brought in conversation with the Caribbean islands to see whether they are also in favor of such a improvement. I've tested it up until now, and that's something that I would really like to work on. That's something that you also need to explore who your allies will be, because it's pretty progressive what we're proposing. And you have to look at the feasibility and whether you meet 150 parliamentarians, where you can then indeed search who will be with you and who will vote with you on such a proposition, and who you can, collaborate with to be successful. So that is definitely one area in terms of perfecting and improving the democracy, to minimize and take away the level of inequality that we currently have.
Yes.
Second subject definitely relates to education and our Caribbean students. We just had, you may have seen it, we just had a report that came out by the National Ombudsman, and he concluded indeed that the Caribbean students in the Netherlands are faced with a variety of problems. sometimes indeed leading to their dropouts, sometimes leaving them with high debts, sometimes the experience of being discriminated, or sometimes feeling that they're not fully integrated in society in the Netherlands. And all those type of factors contribute to inequality and unequal opportunities of Caribbean students in the Netherlands, which need to be tackled and which need to be resolved through indeed propositions to minimize that. D66 is an education party. They have a very extensive educational renewal plan in which they address and observe the growing inequality in terms of opportunities for students to further progress and develop themselves. And that's an overall trend in the Netherlands. But if you then focus on the Caribbean students, it affects the Caribbean students more than other groups within the Netherlands. So that therefore will be a second subject to which I would say I would definitely want to contribute to that subject in terms of resolving it, positioning the Caribbean students in terms of strength, in terms of opportunities, and to ensure that those talents that we have are really used, and come to fruition. And that sometimes goes beyond education as well. It has to do sometimes with the fact that Caribbean students are faced with discrimination, or discrimination in terms of being able to get an internship because of your name, or because of your inability, maybe language or matters of colors. All those type of issues play a role that needs to be addressed as well. So discrimination on whether it's the labor market or your ability to get an internship in the Netherlands goes hand in hand as well. Caribbean students sometimes have difficulty to find suitable housing. Those things are relevant. So I got a signal recently also that a lady was mentioning via LinkedIn saying but we're seeing Caribbean students and youngsters end up homeless, without help or with severe debts, where they are in comparison with Dutch students forced to take a higher loan because the Dutch students can, for instance, still decide to live at home. We don't have those options. Or sometimes we're not properly informed about the consequences of taking a loan and in which manner you have to pay it back. Or sometimes we're not aware that if you don't signal that where you live, that they confront you with the highest pace and to pay it back, in terms of the short period of time. While if you would indeed signal that you would be back on Sint Maarten and inform of what your monthly salary would be, then you have a longer time in order to pay back your debt. So those type of factors are of importance. I think that especially, we can do much more with each other. I can still recall, I think you were part of it as well, Camila, where the youth parliaments came together a couple of years ago, maybe it was before your time, where they said we would like to see whether we can introduce a kind of like a buddy system so that students really actively support one another much more, because especially the free movers are the ones that can end up in trouble because they're not prepared, such as those students that go via study financing, so that they pop up in the Dutch system. And Sint Maarten or Curaçao or Aruba don't even know that they travel because they traveled completely alone and on their own. And then they pop up in the educational system, in the schools, at universities or hogescholen, and then they run into problems. But the Dutch system doesn't recognize them as Caribbean people because they just see their Dutch passport. And then by the time they get help, it's usually already too late. So those type of things need to be addressed. The educational system and the schools need to be much more sensitized, that those students need more immediate help. And so those are two subjects that I would say are part of who I am, where I build up my experience, and where I believe I'm able to make a difference and really get into practical solutions to make the lives of them and also the Caribbean islands better. The third subject, you probably know, I'm a real orange economy, creative industry type of person, so I really value more opportunities with the creative industries, with creative entrepreneurs. I've seen also in the time that I was in the Netherlands in 2018 and 2019, I've seen so many creative persons and artists, whether it's in music, whether it's in visual arts, or whether it's in poetry, that are doing amazing things. But they sometimes have difficulty to make a living.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to explore much more opportunities for the creative industries, not only in the Netherlands, but especially also in terms of collaboration with the Caribbean islands as well. I visited before I came here. I went to Aruba, spoke to a member of parliament in Aruba, but he's also a musician, and he is bringing all kind of artists together, musicians, to promote the music industry and to do much more. It's a source to make a living. It's close to our identity and who we are. It's close to, in terms of many of our talents. And if we are able to translate that into economic sectors, to not have it as a side activity, but as your main source of income, I think we can be less, as Caribbean islands, less sensitive towards the tourism sector. So, and you mentioned earlier, before we started the recording, you also mentioned that culture and identity can also be applied in the tourism sector. So it's both. It is a sector by itself, but it also complements a tourism sector.
Yeah.
And, economic diversity is necessary. So I think the creative industries and culture and heritage definitely have a specific point of attention. The D66 has a program also that emphasizes that cultural heritage should be indeed focused on kingdom-wide. And last but not least, I am also proud that we indeed decided to introduce or propose, in Dutch they say Koninkrijksbreed, so a kingdom-wide fund for climate change and climate adaptation. So that if Bonaire, is a lower type of island, or Sint Maarten or other islands are clearly affected by the issues and the risk of climate change, you need to collaborate on those things, because the fact that we are small island development economies makes us much more vulnerable to the risk impact of the climate. That we need help, and those type of things need to be invested in, need to be collaborated to, and on a respectful and open and honest basis. And that is definitely a fourth subject that I would say I really look forward to propositions in the second chamber that this is instituted, because it's really necessary. D66, they call themselves climate pushers. In Dutch, klimaatdrammers. So they really push the climate law and the climate agreement, and they emphasize that, especially also in Europe, the ambitions need to go higher. The risks are becoming really significant, and I really think that the small islands in the Caribbean and also our islands are at stake. And that's not for now, that's not for in the next year or 2 years, but that's in terms of the long run, and the perspective on the next 10, 20 years is something that really requires serious attention.
Yeah, that is very true. And I guess I could just quickly summarize, a lot of it really has to do with kingdom relations and just making sure that as a kingdom we function how we say we function on paper, and not actually the Netherlands kind of dictate most stuff for the Caribbean and stuff.
Correct.
It was cool. And the music point you point out is really interesting, because we do have a lot of artists, especially from Sint Maarten, that actually currently lives in the Netherlands doing their thing with the music. So I guess finding ways and platforms to push them up, and we do so many different genres, from hip hop to soca to R&B and pop. So I think finding that way to, I guess, generate some type of proper industry for these creatives within the Dutch Caribbean would be pretty cool as well.
Yeah,
And
there's also much more opportunities, I think, that are being grabbed. And if the Netherlands is more sensitized also towards Europe and
mm-hmm,
focuses on European programs, there would also, therefore, be more opportunities to tap into possibilities of collaboration, of
mm-hmm,
opportunities, of capacity building, of investments that can be sought. And as I said, solidarity is first and foremost necessary. And if you function
mm-hmm,
on the basis of solidarity, you can do much more and create much more synergy and really work on the basis of opportunities, mutual opportunities, rather than on a paternalistic, one-sided, I'll tell you what to do type of mentality. And that is necessary. I really think, and I mean it, that once you have strong representation in the second chamber,
mm-hmm.
that you're going to have a more diverse, honest, enthused, and exciting type of conversation about the possibilities that are there. Whatever the islands may decide on the long run, mind you, whether we're going to have a Kingdom of the Netherlands in the next 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
ultimately up to the Caribbean islands, you never
Mm-hmm.
know. There are so many geopolitical, regional type of influences that
Mm-hmm.
maybe there will be different formulas towards a future, and that's ultimately up to the autonomous type of position and choices that islands would make and that Sint Maarten would make. You know that there are movements related to independence
Mm-hmm.
within Sint Maarten as well, and maybe those type of sentiments will further expand and will intensify, and therefore would opt for other type of choices. But my propositions therefore have a very pragmatic 4 to 8 type of
Mm-hmm.
profile, in terms of what you have to work on, where you can make improvements and changes, while on the long run, you have to see where the aspirations and where the dreams and the preference is of citizens on Curacao or in Aruba or in Sint Maarten or in the BES. The BES is
Mm-hmm.
different because they have indeed opted for the extraordinary municipality status within the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
So they have their own set of challenges as well in
Mm-hmm.
terms of a social minimum and whether it's fair in terms of what is considered the same in the Netherlands and what is not the same in the Netherlands. And there should be much more effort to focus on the real developments that say that the cost of living have increased since the dismantling of the Netherlands and the fact that they became
Mm-hmm.
part of the Netherlands. So cost of living, cost of housing, etc., has
Yeah.
increased. Social minimum has not been adjusted. Needs to be adapted immediately, because poverty-related developments and signals are not only on Curaçao, Aruba, and Sint Maarten, but definitely also on Bonaire, Saba, and Statia. And
Mm-hmm.
those are concerning developments that needs to be pushed in on the debate.
That is very true. That is actually really, really true. And it's really cool that you brought up that whole aspect of like with cost of living being so high within our different Caribbean countries, and then the fluctuation to our minimum wage. I know that's been different discussions across different the kingdom governments on like, how do we improve that, how do we fix that. And I know it's an interesting back and forth within across the kingdom, but we can go into more of this is a more technical question. So personally for me, I didn't know until I would say a couple years ago that as like a student living in the Netherlands, you can like vote in like Dutch elections. And there's actually a lot of like students who like don't even know like when elections are happening, how can you vote, how do you register, like all of those ideas, just because I don't think culturally and socially we're so like ingrained into Dutch politics itself, unless it's like an issue where like a kingdom representative has something to say about like the countries, but we're not really into how they say the developments of what's happening in the different parliaments, houses, etc. So for those who are living in the Netherlands and is probably maybe interested in voting in these general elections, what I mean, it's almost March, but what processes can they go through in order to make sure that they can get probably a ballot? Where do they go ballot? What's the system like, etc.?
Yeah. Yeah, this is the most important subject at the end of probably our conversation, because the voter turnout of Antillians in the Netherlands is low. So our voter turnout is really seriously low, lower than other ethnic groups in the Netherlands. And that definitely also relates to what you just mentioned, the fact that students at the age of 17, 18 and up, so let's say the group 17 to 25, visit the Netherlands, come to reside in the Netherlands, register in the Netherlands for predominantly study purposes. And the minute you're registered with your Dutch passport, you're an eligible voter. You don't have to register. So that means that once you have your address, and once you also live on that same address, you can expect in your mailbox the voter ballot.
Okay.
You don't have to do anything extra for it. But we're oftentimes not sensitized, and once that ballot comes in, it can easily get between the mail or newspaper or whatever, and it gets lost. What I noticed when I worked as Minister of Plenipotentiary, indeed, I was like, wait a minute, I'm welcoming all these students here, but actually the majority of these students never voted in their lives. First time that they're allowed to vote will be in the Netherlands. That's different for the students, the Caribbean students that go and study in the States, because you don't have to write out. You can still be registered at the civil registry.
Yeah.
And so you can therefore then make your personal choice if you want to come out and vote. But that's not feasible for the Sint Maarten students, Caribbean students that have to write out in order to write in and be an eligible person to receive the study loan in the Netherlands. So that means that in that group is big. I mean, there are approximately 1,000 students on a yearly basis from Curaçao and Aruba and other islands. And they are often 18 years old when they reach, and could well be that they sometimes are faced with 2 or 3 elections in 1 year. Could be an election, could be an election for the first chamber, could be an election for the Provinciale Staten, they say, and could be an election for the second chamber. And usually it's spread, and it could also be an election for the municipality in which you live.
Okay.
Now that's overwhelming. I mean, you're very sensitized towards political development, political ideology, and because that's your studies and it's your interest. So you probably would be the one like, let me scan, let me see what it has, let me just look at the difference between the ideologies for all the political parties, who can represent me best, what are the issues that I care about. But the majority of us, and really the majority of us, don't make that effort. They really feel as if they are not represented. They're overwhelmed with the complexity of the system, or they just don't care, So, but ultimately, if you end up then with problems or issues sometimes in the educational system by itself already, or related to whether you have a proper housing, yes or no, or whether you're able to get a good job on the labor market, it concerns you. And there are quite some of us that decide not to go back and stay in the Netherlands, self. I met family members residing there for 20 years that never voted, never. So the first message is indeed, just like you said, is like, and I hope that you're going to use your platform as well, is come out to vote. Just come out to vote. Your vote makes a difference. Your vote matters in terms of making choices for the future of the Netherlands and the things that impact your life. And that is about education, it's about housing, and that's about jobs and the labor market. Those type of things are basic, and it will help to develop your ideas, and it will also be feasible that once you return to the Caribbean islands or Sint Maarten, that you have that experience in your pocket, of how you can then also contribute in an interesting manner also in Sint Maarten itself. So they can vote. They don't have to register. They just have to look out, and the voter ballot is already in. I know the majority of us here, of them in the Netherlands. I'm not registered in the Netherlands. I'm registered on Sint Maarten. I'm just an eligible voter because I resided 10 years in the Netherlands. And that's the criteria. So even Sint Maarteners or Caribbean people that lived in the Netherlands with a Dutch nationality for 10 years and up, and they're back on Sint Maarten, they can also partake in the second chamber elections. However, that group needs to register. And that registration deadline already passed.
Okay.
The majority of us don't say like, once I leave, I'm not interested to vote anymore. But technically, legally, you are able to do so. And the more Caribbean people we have in the Netherlands, the more interested we should be to vote. Even also, if it's not primarily for ourselves, it would be for family members and friends. However, we should not underestimate, and that's what I noticed, that the decisions that are made in the second chamber affect our Caribbean islands as well.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of passionate about this thing.
Understandable. So basically everyone should just go in their mailbox and you should have your voting card. And then but that's the next thing. So when it comes to the voting ballot, I know you say there's like 150 seats in the second chamber. Are there like over 100 and something names on the ballots, or is there like a specific way? Like, how do you come?
Hundreds. There are hundreds of names on the ballot.
Okay.
Hundreds, and I think it's even in the thousands. I have to look it up again, but I think it's beyond 1,000. So there are quite some names on the ballots, and of course, people have a tendency in the Netherlands to vote for the party leader. That is also different in comparison to us. That there's more unity within the political organization. And there's a strong focus on the party leader. The focus is in terms of the support is for the party leader. So it's less of an individual campaign. It's also individual personal campaigns, yes, but they really focus a lot of time and effort to strengthen the party in its entirety, to ensure that the messages that come out, that we apply, are consistent, that it's not so that Camilla, talks about very different things that Jorien is talking about, for instance, while they're on the same list. So party ideology matters, and consistency in messaging is relevant, and they then assign you with certain things that they really think that you're good at, that you can target with your groups. But just like you said, there are hundreds of people on the list. The majority just automatically clicks the number 1 or 2. But I do think that there will be significant differences this year, because the campaign is online, is really through social media, because there's a hard lockdown. There's a curfew as of 9 o'clock. We're not allowed to do anything. Supermarkets is the only thing that's open. Restaurants closed, boutiques closed, businesses closed. It's extreme here in Europe. And that means that people really resort to social media in order to bring their message across. And that could have maybe a very surprising impact. That I do think that it might reach a younger generation. And it will also therefore reach our Caribbean people. And that will therefore also then contribute to a higher voter turnout. And then also maybe a different type of outcome in terms of elections, in terms of Caribbean representation, in terms of female and women empowerment and representation, also in terms of the equality. It's currently there's only 30% is are female in the second chamber, 35%, I think. And that also, I think, is going to balance out this year. So there are strong voices that really say, like, vote for a woman. Those type of movements are ongoing. And there are also very strong movements in terms of, vote for a person with a bicultural background and with a different ethnic background. So that's all going to contribute to a level of attention to these type of things. Yeah, so.
Okay. So, and elections is on March 12th. Am I correct?
17th.
March 17th. Okay, so March
Yeah.
17th, you can go to, I guess, your nearest polling station that is
Yeah.
on listed on your ballot.
Actually, it's on the Caribbean islands, especially Bonaire, Seba, and Statia. It's only on the 17th, but in the Netherlands, due to the
Mm-hmm.
impact and the risk associated with COVID, they decided to spread it out over 3 days. So
Okay.
it's on the 15th, 16th, and the
16th and
17th.
17th.
Yeah. And they've also encouraged a lot of voting by mail.
Mm-hmm.
So those type of things are also a bit experimental and to get it done in an appropriate manner. But they're doing that also for safety purposes, for especially elderly that
Mm-hmm.
want to go to a voting bureau. So yeah, it's going to intensify the next 2 weeks. It's the last 2 weeks of the elections. So I just had a congress today. I was able to, with the other Caribbean guy, to do a sub-session with our conference about
Mm-hmm.
education of Caribbean students, which was very nice.
Okay.
So we really presented because D66 decided to establish, we call it D66 Caribbean Network. So
Okay.
we established a Caribbean network to also ensure that the connectivity to things that relate to the Caribbean islands is brought forward, is discussed, but is also then tabled um, for the agenda, for the political agenda. So we did a presentation about that subject Thursday, which was
Mm-hmm.
interesting.
That's
Also,
good. That's
yeah,
great. And well, that was all my really intense questions regarding your campaign and everything that you want to do. So, what I'd like to do to wrap up the episode, I'd like to have like a funnish type of question just to end on like a lighter-ish note, depending on the conversation. So, for someone who's like you're in politics, you work in all these work within government, etc. What is something like you do during your free time? Like something you like to wind down, like something people probably don't really know about. Like what's your wind down moment, your free time moment?
I like to wind down sometimes. I didn't do any. I didn't do it for Juve since 2018. Actually, since I left.
Oh.
I think, or maybe I did 2019, maybe when I visited. So it's been a
Mm-hmm.
while. So
Mm-hmm.
I like my Juve, but that's only once a year, of course.
Yeah.
But that says something that I love to dance. I love music,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I've been missing also since this whole COVID 1.5 meter economy that we're not allowed to touch each other
Yeah.
anymore, which is very very difficult. So I sometimes dance alone or I play music. And I was happy today too because these elections and these social media is so intense that just like I
Mm-hmm.
only sit the entire day
Yeah.
sitting chats via, and that's kind of like sometimes I miss movement. So I was
Mm-hmm.
happy today to take a walk and a run.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm in Sint Maarten, I left last week. I just came this week, so I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't. And I just like to run the boardwalk at times.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed during the lockdown to go make some hikes with some friends.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the good things that I think the COVID brought, that we use the outdoors more. Of course, we have good weather in the Caribbean, so that makes a
Mm-hmm.
whole lot of a difference. So, which was nice. I really encourage everybody also to do so. And everybody's hitting the road for a power walk, and it builds your immune system. What I also did, especially in terms of food security and food safety, and so that
Mm-hmm.
everybody was busy. I'm really in favor of spaceless gardens and the eco gardening of Denise
Mm-hmm.
White and St. Peter's. I also did with the old wood that I still had out of Irma. I also made my little greenhouse. I had somebody
Okay.
help me. Yeah, so those type of things are fun, different. It's
Mm-hmm.
necessary also because when we had this whole outbreak of this pandemic, there were times that you thought that the flights would stop and that we would not be able to receive any type of food anymore,
Mm-hmm.
and then you see how vulnerable we are because we rely on everything has to be consumed and
Exported. Yeah. I mean imported. Yeah.
imported, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and So, your own food security is at risk. And it's something that, for instance, Denisio has been preaching for the longest a while.
He
And
has,
I've been
yes.
also supporting. And then you start to practice it. And you've seen numerous community backyard gardens, established since,
Yeah.
which is super. But those type of things is what I enjoy. A good conversation,
Yeah.
good food with a nice conversation about things we all care about, or those are the things. Dancing, movement, um, a little bit of backyard gardening when it's possible, and good food and a good conversation about things that matter. Yeah.
Awesome. Oh,
You?
that's
What do you
great.
do? What do you like to do?
Me, I wow, I was not expecting that. I am actually, well, for those who actually listened to the last episode of this podcast, you would know I am like a big basketball fan. So I tend to just, at the end of the day, I tend to turn on either ESPN, TNT, whoever has on a game, and just watch the basketball games until it's
What's your
time for
favorite?
Sports Center. And
Who's
that's
who's-
just usually how I just relax, honestly. It stresses me out sometimes if my
who's
favorite
your
team is
favorite
playing.
team?
Excuse me, my favorite team? Um, for the NBA, my favorite team are the Los Angeles Lakers, just because that's what I grew up on. Like back home, that's everything like I used to watch. And then by default, because I pay the institution so much money, I am also a fan of my university team, which is the Wichita State Shockers. Which actually we had really great news um yesterday, which I guess is a random update. We had really great news yesterday where our interim coach is now the official head coach of our team, and he's also the first black head coach of our team in the university history, and is
Oh,
the first black head coach in Kansas history. So that was kind of like a historical moment yesterday.
great.
It was nice, especially, we had a kind of termless summer off season with coaching staff, etc. So this was a nice moment. It was a nice win. So that's really it. And cook and eat,
Cool.
have
You
conversations.
play? You play ball yourself? You play basketball?
No, I have zero athletic ability. I do not. I cannot play basketball at all. But I just really love the sport. Grew up on it. I used to be in the auditorium, like from small. Used to watch my parents and my uncle play basketball in the auditorium. When I'm back home and they have tournaments, I'll be in the auditorium watching games too.
Cool.
So that's just really my passion, like my free time type of
I grew out
vibes.
of actually the NBA games because I went to the Netherlands, and it was much more challenging to get access and to watch.
Hmm.
But need until 2018, especially with the finals when they reached. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. But with that, I'm going to wrap up this episode. And for people who want to contact you, where can they find you?
On my socials, Jorien Wuite.
Hmm.
So JORIENWUITE. Various socials: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn.
Hmm.
And I also have a website with www.jorienwuite.com.
Hmm.
That's where they can find me.
All right, that's great. And thank you so much for being with me here this afternoon. I am actually going to put all her information in the description so you can check that out there. And this was episode 5 of the We Talkin Podcast. And I hope you have a wonderful day and see you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.